Thank you. Good morning, everybody. I'm so excited and honored to be here among such a passionate, eclectic group of people from all over the world and all in very different fields wrestling with the tough, some would say even unanswerable questions. I'm an educator, and so it will not be surprising to you to know that the three toughest questions that I feel I've been wrestling with for my career are also the questions that I think are most important for us to be able to answer if we're ever going to have a public education system worthy of this now more than 2-century experiment in democracy. First, how do people learn best? Second, what are the skills of a free people? And then third, and I think kind of most importantly, what in the end does it really mean to be free? So I want to share with you what I've learned about those three questions, and let's take them in order. So how do people learn? So for the last several years, what I've been doing is I've been asking everybody I know to all reflect on and answer the same basic question. What was your most powerful personal experience in a learning community? And we've asked that question specifically that way because for a lot of us, our most powerful learning experience was actually not in school. In fact, probably for about half of the people that we've spoken to, it's a learning experience that occurs outside of school. And we're not just interested in how people learn in that formal schooling period. We want to know across your whole lived experience, whether you were 5 years old or it happened last month, whether it was in school or out of school, when and where were you when you learned best? And we've gotten lots of stories from people all over the world, and they're from students to social workers to the Secretary of Education. They're people whose names everybody would know. They're mostly people like you and me that only their closest friends know. And the stories run the gamut. I mean, people are talking about the things that you would expect people to talk about: third grade, kindergarten, that unforgettable teacher that first ignited a passion in you. But they're also talking about lots of things that you may not immediately think of when you think of learning. A church mission to Mexico and time spent with a host family. A prison sentence where for the first time somebody understood what the great books had to offer. AA, or an Outward Bound course. But the purpose in gathering all of these stories was not just to let people kind of engage in happy talk. It was literally to try to construct a national mirror, to stitch together all of these lived experiences and to try to hold it up to all of us and let us reflect on what we see. It was a way of trying to mine the personal in ways that can enhance the professional environments in which we all work and learn. And some pretty powerful epiphanies have emerged. And by the way, this is still ongoing, so believe me, I'll be following up with all of you. I need your stories. I want you to talk to your friends and family and get their stories. But the things that emerge most powerfully for me are two. First of all, we know more than we think we do about what powerful learning really looks like and requires. We know a lot. And secondly, what human beings actually need in order for powerful learning to occur are the same things. And the way that we figure this out is each time a story would come in, and this will continue to happen, it's tagged. So whether it's about AA or third grade, it's tagged according to the attributes of what it is that made that experience so powerful. And it probably won't be surprising to you to know that the attributes that overwhelmingly rose to the surface across all of these different experiences around the world are these: that ideally, the healthiest learning environment is challenging, it's engaging, it's relevant, meaning the learning is relevant to the learner, it's supportive, and it's experiential. Challenging, engaging, relevant, supportive, and experiential. Right? I mean, we all kind of know this. In fact, I guarantee if we were to do the same thing with all of you here and gather your stories, it would point to those same insights. And there's actually a lot of recent research that points to what we now know about how the brain works and how people learn that affirms that qualitative kind of anecdotal research that we've done. There are people that talk about the fact that in all of us there is, for lack of a better way to put it, a biological urge to speak. We all feel in kind of the deepest parts of ourselves this need to be visible, this need to be seen and heard. We are meaning makers, we're meaning searchers, and therefore learning has to be about helping us acquire that deeper sense of meaning. And so for those of you that aren't educators, when you hear that, you might think two things. Well, yeah, right, obviously. And you might even, and it would not be unreasonable for you to think so, well, obviously that's what we're doing right now in public education, right? Well, actually, no. And to me, there's the danger. I mean, so in the last 15 months, I've been an educator my whole adult life, and I would say in the last 15 months, we've probably spent more time as a country talking about public education than the previous 15 years. You know, from federal programs like Race to the Top, or people deciding if they love or hate Michelle Rhee's scorched earth reform policies, or Waiting for Superman. I mean, just by a show of hands, how many people have heard of the film Waiting for Superman? See, this is amazing to me, because this is an education documentary. Like, people, generally don't get excited about education, and yet this is a film that, if not everybody has seen, certainly almost everybody has heard about. And it's become a bit polarizing, but actually there's a scene in Waiting for Superman that I think sums up just how much work we have to do. And it's actually an animated graphic. There are animated graphics used throughout that film, which is relevant, you'll see in a moment, based on what I'm about to describe. And it's like the typical classroom scene, which we all know, right? Immediately, if I say typical classroom, I can guarantee we almost all have the exact same image in our head. If somebody was going to travel through time from 100 years ago to today, the world would seem very foreign, but they could walk right into a public school building and feel at home. So we've got kids in rows, we've got the blackboard, we've got the teacher up at the front. And the purpose of the graphic, what happens is, suddenly, all of the tops of the kids' heads come off, revealing this kind of empty crater. Literally, they are empty vessels waiting to be taught. And the teacher is holding a giant ladle of knowledge, like a mixture of letters and numbers. And what the teacher is trying to do in the graphic is she's trying to literally pour the knowledge and the wisdom into the heads of these passive young people. And here's the crazy thing. This graphic is not offered critically. The assumption is that that's what learning is, right? That's what schooling is. So the purpose of the graphic is to show that because there are all of these other things happening in education, and there are, that are impacting the teacher's ability to focus on her students, her aim is off. So the purpose of the graphic is to show that she's actually missing her targets. And so this knowledge, the goal of public education, is like pouring helplessly onto the ground. I'm sorry, are you kidding me? I mean, we can do better. This is a problem. This is a problem when this film that everybody knows about is offering this graphic uncritically, as though obviously that's what we need to be doing, and so we just have to help teachers perfect their aim. So in a way, it's not surprising, because the reason that that image is so familiar is that's the industrial model of schooling, right? That's about a century old. That was devised at a different time in our history when there were different needs. That actually educators took as language the language of the assembly line. This is why we went to school with kids our own age. It was literally, we had to batch and queue and sort young people. We had to standardize content, just like we would standardize parts on the assembly line. And we had to prepare people, young people, for the jobs that they would take in the new economy. I'm not even saying that critically. I mean, I think that was probably what we needed at that time. I think we can also all agree that that's not what we need today. That what we need is actually the beginning of a transition from the industrial age to the democracy age. Which leads to question number 2, right? So what are the skills of a free people? So I started as a classroom teacher, but then for the last 10 years or so, I've been working with schools and school districts around the country. And it's been really valuable for me because I've gotten to sit in a lot of classrooms and spend time in a lot of different schools and learning environments. And one of the things that I've realized is that every school, whether it intends to or not, is structured to produce a different kind of citizen. And so obviously, you would like to think that in the United States of America, where we begin with the revolutionary notion that all human beings, not all citizens, but all human beings, are born with certain inalienable rights, and that the goal of an open society is to give us all the space to exercise those rights responsibly, you would think that our schools would all be very concerned with trying to make sure that young people are given the skills and the self-confidence they need to succeed in that world. Right? But, okay, so let's think about the Waiting for Superman graphic. Based on what you know, both from your own lived experiences and how I described that classroom, what are the skills that off the top of your head seem most likely to be acquired by young people in that kind of an environment? And this is the audience participation part of the speech. Yep. Certainly, to do well on a standardized test, to be passive recipients of knowledge, right? The old model. To please the teacher. Compliance. Say it again. Following instructions. Competitive. So, last one. Memorization. Okay. All right, one more. Isolated. So, we have a 21st century classroom designed to produce skills of memorization, isolation, conformity, and following the rules. Just what we need for a democracy, right? And yet, again, this is the most popular movie of the day. So the bad news is there are still a lot of schools that are structured, like the one depicted in Waiting for Superman. But the good news is there are actually a lot of schools across the country that are proactively creating environments that are designed to equip young people with the skills of a free people. The best school I've ever worked in, it's a public school of choice in New Hampshire. And here's the mission statement, right? I mean, so we know that in a school or an organization, sometimes mission statements are meaningful, sometimes they're a total waste of time. But this is the best mission statement I've ever heard, okay? And it tells you how they answer the question. Empowering each individual with the knowledge and skills to use his or her unique voice effectively and with integrity in co-creating our common public world. Right? I mean, that's it, right? But we also all know, okay, so that and a cup of coffee will get you a cup of coffee if the mission isn't actually what helps everybody operationalize what happens in that school. And sure enough, it will not surprise you to know that, sure, young people in those schools, they focus on content and curriculum. They learn something about the 3 branches of government, which is important. But the things that they're evaluated on are what that community has decided are the skills of a free people. Communication, collaboration, curiosity and wonder, leadership, self-awareness, creativity, critical thinking. I could go on. And everything that they do is designed to evaluate themselves, the young people and the teachers, as to how effectively they're preparing young people to embody those skills when they graduate. So, I mean, it ain't rocket science, but there are a few things that are pretty key in that story. One is that school recognizes that the most essential thing to do is not simply to measure what's most convenient, but to begin by measuring what you most value, and to recognize that meaning is essential, and even if you can't always measure it, it can't be given short shrift. And they also recognize that, you know, intellectual learning is one thing, but in any healthy environment, we have to tend to not only intellectual, but also emotional and spiritual needs. So, and the great thing, too, is it's not like everybody has to answer that question the same way, but we have to be asking it. What are the skills of a free people? How are we creating that environment here, and how will we know? So the last question, what does it mean to be free? Well, in a way, this is where those two questions come together. And it's fitting that not only would I have an opportunity to reflect on that question in this 2011, a year of upheaval and revolution where people around the world are literally risking their lives in the name of freedom, but also that I would be doing it in Sin City, where sometimes freedom might take on a different definition than what we ultimately aspire to. And those of you that have seen the movie WALL-E, WALL-E does a great job of depicting far in the future what might happen if we continue to define what it means to be free by the terms of freedomism rather than freedom. You know, those of you that have seen the movie know that the human beings in WALL-E are literally passive couch potatoes who consume. And to some degree, this is how the word freedom has been misinterpreted over the years. And to some degree, that's the type of citizen that graphic in Waiting for Superman is most likely to produce. But as we've seen stirringly in Egypt, as we've seen powerfully in Wisconsin, what it means to be free is actually something that goes much more to the essence of who we are. What it means to be free is to discover one's full worth and to have the skills needed to unleash one's full potential on the world. That's what it means to be free. So what would happen if we had a system of schools that was dedicated to producing those types of young people and that was at every turn proactively asking and answering those three questions? I think, first of all, we would recognize that democracy is not a fixed concept. It's not capital D democracy. It's not something we pass on passively from generation to generation like your grandfather's old suit. Actually, democracy is something we are only in the earliest stages of understanding. And democracy is less about the what of the past and more about the who, about the unique individual, about having the skills and self-confidence to discover our unique voice and unleash that voice on the world. And if we could create a system that was producing future generations proactively to develop that type of sensibility, I'm confident that we would change the world. And that, to me, is an idea worth spreading. So, thank you.